TGIF, people, welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and thank you for joining me for our weekly history lessons about World of Warcraft, where we focus on one piece of content from vanilla World of Warcraft and dive deep into the lore of the game. The first 30 minutes or so of this show will be a collation of information that you can find at the amazing WoW Wiki and Wowpedia websites. However, if you're not much of a lore buff, then please feel free to skip ahead to the second half of the episode, where we'll go through a bit of the community reactions to the content from back in the day and get through a bit of fun with regular segments, anger management, and tidbits. If you do happen to like what you're about to hear, then please do subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts from, and like, follow, or subscribe to the show on all social media platforms, which you can find the links at countdowntoclassic.com. And just a reminder that you can email me with just a hello or a bit of feedback or a shout out at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get straight into it with a scoop of vanilla. Stratholme was the northernmost and second most populous city of the Kingdom of Lordaeron, and is the city where the Order of the Silver Hand was founded. Today, Stratholme is the Scourge's capital in Lordaeron. The mad Prince Arthas ravaged Stratholme in the Third War, and the undead moved in soon after. Stratholme burns to this day, and its districts have been split between the overzealous Scarlet Crusade, led by Grand Crusader Dathrahan, and the Scourge forces, led by the Death Knight Baron Rivendare. A description from Blizzard's official World Dungeons site went as follows. Once the jewel of northern Lordaeron, the city of Stratholme is where Prince Arthas turned against his mentor, Uther the Lightbringer, and slaughtered hundreds of his own subjects who were believed to have contracted the dreaded Plague of Undeath. Arthas's downward spiral and ultimate surrender to the Lich King soon followed. The broken city is now inhabited by the undead Scourge, led by the powerful Lich, Kel'Thuzad. A contingent of Scarlet Crusaders, led by Grand Crusader Dathrahan, also holds a portion of the ravaged city. The two sides are locked in constant, violent combat. Those adventurers brave or foolish enough to enter Stratholme will be forced to contend with both factions before long. It's said that the city is guarded by 3 massive watchtowers, as well as powerful necromancers, banshees, and abominations. There have also been reports of a malefic Death Knight riding atop an unholy steed, dispensing indiscriminate wrath on all those who venture within the realm of the Scourge. So here we go with the history of Stratholme. Let's get stuck into it. The original Stratholme was a port town built on the northeast edge of Daramir Lake. Stratholme was the chief source of Alliance oil in the north. At the beginning of the Second War, Stratholme, or more specifically the Alonz's Chapel, was the location where the Archbishop Alonz's Fowl founded the Holy Order of the Knights of the Silver Hand, and indoctrinated its first 5 members, including Uther the Lightbringer and Sidon Dathrahan. So, off to our first mild tangent, as we do here on Countdown to Classic with the lore. Given that the Knights of the Silver Hand were founded in Stratholme, who were they? Well, the Holy Order of Northshire Clerics, a clerical order comprised of clerics, priests, and paladins based in Northshire Abbey, was devastated during the First War. Seeking to create an order that would suffer less attrition in battle, Alonz's Fowl, the Archbishop of the Church of the Holy Light, an organization dedicated to creating a world of honor and justice, and his apprentice, Uther, recruited noble knights to train in the ways of the light, and members of the priesthood to train in martial combat. In Alonza's chapel in Stratholme, Uther was appointed the first of the paladins. He was joined by several other paladins who were keen to sign up. They were Sidan Dathrahan, a booming 6.5-foot tall knight who heavily trusted in his faith. He became an eventual member of the Scarlet Crusade, who we heard about in episode number 6 of the show, and we'll get to that later, but again, please do listen to that episode if you haven't already. There was also Tyrion Fordring, a warrior of Lordaeron who had been knighted at the tender age of 18, and Turalian, a noble and one of the most venerated priests in Lordaeron by the time of the Second War. Those 4 members were handpicked by the Archbishop himself. The final member, Gavinrad, was a candidate proposed by Lord Anduin Lothar, the supreme commander of the armies of the Alliance of Lordaeron during the Second War. Gavinrad had accompanied Lothar and other human refugees during the humans' mass exodus to Lordaeron following the fall of Stormwind at the end of the First War. He was also actually charged with commanding Stormwind's defences at the final stage of the siege of Stormwind during Anduin's absence, and it was during this time that King Lane was assassinated by Garona Halforsen on Gavinrad's watch, in a way. Yikes. However, the battle-hardened knight was considered one of the most pious of Lothar's troops, and the Archbishop accepted Lord Lothar's recommendation, and thus the Order of the Silver Hand was born. The Paladins were instrumental in winning the Second War, and at some stage, Countdown to Classic will take the time to go through the wars and the complete events of past Warcraft games, but those are for other episodes. The Order of the Silver Hand were notably deployed to quell a peasant revolt at Tyr's Hand, a fortified city located in the Eastern Plaguelands, or even though they weren't called the Eastern Plaguelands at the time. And the sight of them wielding their mighty warhammers and holy powers gave others inspiration on the battlefield and the home front. Uther and his paladins were truly a sight to behold. Even some of the Alliance's greatest knights and warriors were in awe when they saw them smashing orcs down while healing fallen allies at the same time. Uther was the first paladin known to have manifested his powers on the battlefield, and was given the title of the Lightbringer by Turalian. Turalian himself did not master his powers until after Lothar's death during the Siege of Blackrock Spire, one of the bloodiest and most decisive battles of the Second War. But once he had mastered it, the Orcish army cowered from his blinding light, which was said to shine brighter than the brightest day. During the Second War, Stratholme was at one stage preparing to deliver massive amounts of oil to the kingdoms in western Lordaeron. The Horde sabotaged its refineries and platforms to halt their shipment and destroyed the city. With the destruction of Stratholme, the Alliance supply lines to Quel'Thalas, the traditional home of the High Elves, were severed. After the Second War, Stratholme was eventually rebuilt in landlocked northern Lordaeron. With the city rebuilt, it began to prosper, and not only relive, but also surpass its former glory days. And at its height, it housed nearly 25,000 people, and included many well-known buildings, from the glorious keep to Fras Siabi's famous tobacco shop. While the capital city, also known as Capital City, or also known as Lordaeron, was the jewel in the Kingdom of Lordaeron's crown, the rebuilt Stratholme became second to the capital in terms of both renown and population. Forming a headquarters within Stratholme, the Order of the Silver Hand began training new paladins in Stormwind City and Ironforge. Arthas Menethil, Prince of Lordaeron, was sworn into the Order in a ceremony performed at Stormwind's Cathedral of Light. During these times, the Bastion of the Silver Hand, located in the western districts of Stratholme, was considered as the barracks of the Order, containing countless treasures of the Orders. So, That brings us up to speed with what was happening in Stratholme in the period following the Second War. The Kingdom of Lordaeron began to thrive following victory in the war, and the city thrived along with it. A sense of status quo began to set in as time passed, and I guess the only slightly controversial event that happened in Stratholme prior to the Third War was when original member of the Fab Five of the Knights of the Silver Hand, Tyrion Fordring, was tried for treason. Hey, Josh, you're saying, that sounds really interesting. Should I talk about it? Screw it. All right. It's pretty interesting, and it's just another quick tangent. I promise it's not too long, and I wouldn't tell the story if it wasn't interesting and if it wasn't slightly related to the topic at hand. So here we go. After the Second War, Tyrion lived a comfortable life as the governor of the Alliance Principality of Hearthglen, north of Anderhull, in the area now known as the Western Plaguelands. Both a great warrior and a just ruler, well respected by his subjects and loved by his wife Coranda and son Talon, Tyrion was renowned throughout the Kingdom of Lordaeron. In spite of his acclaimed military prowess, Tyrion's experience as a paladin during the Orcish invasions had taught him to value peace. After the wars were over, Tyrion prayed every night that no conflict would ever bring harm to his subjects again. One day, he encountered an old orc hermit living in an abandoned tower. The two immediately battled and traded blows until a piece of the ruined tower collapsed onto Tyrion, knocking him senseless. He awoke in his bed days later and discovered that he had been found badly beaten, tied to his saddle, and had been healed by his ambitious second, Bartholus, an ambitious young paladin who had lost his parents in the Second War, and had left the young man with a deep hatred for all orcs. Realizing that the orc had saved him from the ruins, Tyrion set out and retraced his steps back to the tower. The orc Eitrig told Tyrion that before the coming to Azeroth, the orcs had been a noble society rooted in shamanism. After the war, Eitrig had left the corrupt horde. Tyrion, seeing great honour in Eitrig, or Atrig, I'll flip-flop, promised to keep his existence a secret, returning to his people and informing them that the orc had been dealt with and was not a threat. Bartholus was not so confident and called Cidan Dathrahan to come and settle the matter himself. Dathrahan picked up the trail and led a group of hunters into the woods, where they found Atrig. During the orcs' capture, Tyrion fought against Dathrahan's men, prompting Bartholus to gleefully note that his actions were treasonous. Tyrion was brought to Stratholme to take part in a major trial. Major trials were rare and reserved for the highest of crimes within Lordaeron, such as treason, and were always to be presided over by 4 of the highest-ranking lords within the Alliance. Despite Carandra's pleas to forget his honour and tell the jury what they wanted to hear, Tyrion, hoping to be an example to his son, told the court exactly what had happened. Ultimately, the jury of Admiral Dalen Proudmoore, Jaina Proudmoore's father, Archmage Antonidas, head of the Kirin Tor of Dalaran, Archbishop Alonzus Fowl, the guy I literally just told you about 5 minutes ago, and Prince Arthas Menethil, a.k.a. Oh, no, wait, that's a typo. I've got in my notes the Lich King. That's probably a little bit of a mistake. Obviously, it's the Lich King in waiting, not the Lich King. But anyway, that's an interesting one as well. Anyway, the 4 high-ranking jury members decided that since Tyrion had assaulted Alliance soldiers, he could no longer be a member of the Knights of the Silver Hand and was doomed to exile. Uther the Lightbringer performed a ceremony to strip Tyrion of his powers and sent him home to gather some supplies. However, as a last token of respect to his friend, Uther did not exile Tyrion's family for his crime. After returning home, he bid a farewell to his son and wife. But, desperate to prevent Atrig from being executed for war crimes, Tyrion rode straight back to Stratholme, where he attacked Atrig's guards. Though surprised, the guards still managed to subdue Tyrion, until a group of orcs stormed into the city from nowhere. Tyrion used the distraction to free Atrig and flee Stratholme. When they were in the wilds, Tyrion saw that Aetrig was near death and did the only thing he could do, call upon the powers of the light to heal the orc who had saved him. To his surprise, he still had the powers blessed by the light, and Aetrig was saved. They abruptly found themselves surrounded by orcs and a new war chief, Stratholme, who approached Aetrig and invited him back into the horde, which had since reverted back to its shamanistic roots once more. Aetrig was thrilled to accept, but before he left with his people, Aetrig proclaimed that Tyrion and he were brothers, bound by blood and honour. Through his actions, Tyrion also gained the undying respect of Thrall, one of the few humans he holds in such high regard, and which continues to this day. Tyrion eventually returned to the area surrounding Stratholme, but not to the city itself, as he was kind of banished, but instead he kept a watchful eye from afar over his son Talon, who eventually himself became a Knight of the Silver Hand. Anyway, after all that, Stratholme continued to grow and prosper, remaining a peaceful location and still acted as the headquarters of the Knights of the Silver Hand. However, things certainly did not remain all sunshine and roses for the good people of Stratholme. And now we get to the part where we delve into the early stages of Warcraft 3. Up in Northrend, an evil force began to stir. Using his will alone, the Lich King, also known as former Orc Shaman Ner'zhul, encased in the mystical ice of the Frozen Throne atop the Ice-Crowned Glacier, made a bit of a tactical move by devising a plague as a means to create the Scourge for an attack on Azeroth. The Scourge was intended to be an army of the undead and a vanguard for the Burning Legion, a vast, innumerable army of demons and corrupted races who seek to destroy all life, and whom were Ner'zhul's captors. The mystic disease was concocted by the Lich King and was spread to the human settlements of Northrend, killing them and causing them to rise again as undead under the influence of Ner'zhul. The Lich King then also attempted to spread the plague amongst the other races of Northrend. However, the Nerubians proved immune to the plague. After the wizard Kel'Thuzad answered Ner'zhul's psychic call, and again, please listen to episode 2 on Naxxramas for more on that, he was tasked with containing the plague and transporting it across the sea to Lordaeron, where it was to be used to infect food supplies and distributed to the populace under the supervision of the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis, a Nathrezim and a huge demon taskmaster basically, and acting lieutenant of the Burning Legion. Kel'Thuzad first had to gather a cult of followers to aid him in the spreading of the plague, and for this he established the Cult of the Damned. With the aid of his cultists, Kel'Thuzad and Mal'Ganis used the agricultural hub of Andahal to ship plague-infected grain to the surrounding towns within Lordaeron, which included Brill and Stratholme. After successfully destroying the infected granaries in the other towns, Prince Arthas, fresh on the heels of Mal'Ganis, arrived too late at Stratholme, as he found its people already infected by the tainted grain. The populace, unaware of the plague, had baked and consumed the infected grain. The Dreadlord Mal'Ganis was silently overseeing the operation. Those contracting the plague typically die within 3 days, rising shortly thereafter as feral zombies easily controlled by the Lich King's immense psychic power. Knowing that the citizens would soon turn into the cursed undead, Arthas made the tough decision to purge the city and slaughter all of its citizens as an extreme measure of quarantine for the good of the Kingdom of Lordaeron. Arthas ordered Uther, as his future king, to assist in the culling with his paladins. However, Uther, horrified at how his prince could come to such a decision and how easily he'd come to terms with it, declared that he would have nothing to do with such a heinous act. This decision effectively ended Arthas's run as a paladin, and he turned his back on his brethren of the light as he accused Uther of treason, relieved him from command, suspended his paladins from service, and sent them away, with Uther leaving in disgust, along with his paladins, most of the soldiers, and Jaina Proudmoore, who also elected not to help her dear friend Arthas in his mad act. Arthas and some loyal followers proceeded with the culling in order to prevent the citizens of Stratholme from bolstering Mal'Ganus's ranks. The city's population was almost completely massacred by Arthas and his remaining men, along with the undead. As Arthas went through with the massacre, the Dreadlord Mal'Ganus appeared and began collecting those civilians who had already been transformed into mindless zombies, and he teleported the zombies into the twisting nether for safekeeping. Mal'Ganus gloated that soon the people of Lordaeron would belong to the Scourge. Arthas refused to let that happen and hastened his slaughter of the populace. The two sides proceeded to ravage the city building by building, and finally, when most of the city was in ruins and its inhabitants either dead or converted, Arthas and Mal'Ganus confronted each other face to face. Arthas demanded that Mal'Ganus fight him there and now. Mal'Ganus, however, told Arthas to gather his forces and meet him in Northrend, as it was there that they would settle their conflict. Mal'Ganus then teleported away. Arthas vowed to hunt Mal'Ganus to the ends of the earth, leaving Stratholme in ruin and flame as he headed to Northrend. Some uninfected survivors did make it out of the culling, and the majority of them fled with Jaina Proudmoore. Following these events, the once great city of Stratholme was left empty and burning. The appearance of the Plague of Undeath nearly marked the end of the Order of the Silver Hand. After Stratholme was purged, some former paladins, now called Death Lords, also committed the same heinous act in many other cities across Lordaeron. Arthas later lost his soul to the cursed runeblade Frostmourne and became a Death Knight in the service of the Lich King. Returning to Lordaeron, Arthas killed several notable paladins, sadly including Gavinrad the Dire and Uther the Lightbringer. Other fallen paladins whose souls were twisted and bound to the will of the Frozen Throne would later also join the ranks of the Scourge as Death Knights. The paladins who remained in Lordaeron continued to fight against the Scourge under the leadership of Lord Commander Saidan Dathrahan and High Lord Alexandros Mograine, who wielded the Ashbringer. The paladins fought the undead throughout the Plaguelands. From their base at Hearthglen, they were able to gain some victories, but they weren't able to achieve their goal, the complete destruction of the Scourge. And speaking of the Scourge, sniffing a bit of an opportunity in the real estate market, the undead Scourge, as mentioned, were now running rampant across what were becoming known as the Plaguelands, and were now spawning in several locations across northern Lordaeron. These accursed undead beings eventually found their way to Stratholme and moved in en masse. Worried about the Forsaken entrenching themselves both at Stratholme and in the ruins of Lordaeron, the Paladins established a base in what would later be known as the Scarlet Monastery in Tirisfal Glades. They also made an alliance with Lord Valdemar of Tyr's Hand for mutual assistance. The Paladins planned an attack on Stratholme. However, Lord Commander Saidan Dathrahan was killed and his corpse possessed by the Dreadlord Balnazar as a fleshly costume. Balnazar started slowly working against the Order's objectives from the inside. Fearing that the Ashbringer might destroy the Forsaken before his plans could come to fruition, Varamathras had Balnazar arrange Alexandros' death by manipulating his son, Renaud, into killing him. The possessed Sidon Dathrahan then reorganized what remained of the Silver Hand in Lordaeron into the Scarlet Crusade. These paladins strove fanatically to destroy evil without any regards to the means used, and despised all non-human races, which of course we learned about in episode 6 of Countdown to Classic when I covered the Scarlet Crusade, right? I hope you've all been paying attention, class. Other paladins, disgusted with the Scarlet Crusader's zealotry, formed the Argent Dawn, which took a less extreme approach and accepted members from all of Azeroth's races into their ranks. Following this, the Silver Hand effectively ceased to exist and had no presence in Lordaeron. That is, until Tyrion Fordring wound up coming out of exile. Tyrion's son Talon, having been a member of the Silver Hand, had in turn become a member of the Scarlet Crusade when they rebranded. But when he decided that he wasn't totally on board with this new regime, Talon attempted to leave the Crusade, but was sadly killed for tendering his letter of resignation. Upon learning of this, Tyrion vowed to create a new order, dedicated to extinguishing the evils of the world. He said, "The death of my son at the hands of these monsters will not pass without incident. Take solace in knowing that the Order is reborn. I now take my place as High Lord of the new Order of the Silver Hand." In-game, this Order of Knights is mentioned to be active during the initial assault on Naxxramas by Eligor Dawnbringer in a conversation at Light's Hope Chapel. Now, after the end of the war, when the new Lich King Arthas was called back to Northrend, the Lich Overlord Kel'Thuzad established Stratholme as his capital and positioned his floating fortress, the Necropolis Naxxramas, above the ruined city. At the start of events in World of Warcraft, which is set approximately 5 years after the culling of Stratholme, Stratholme acts as quite possibly the largest stronghold held by the Scourge in all of Lordaeron. Leading Scourge forces in the city below is a former noble turned Death Knight by the name of Baron Rivendare, who coordinates the efforts of the Lich King in the Plaguelands, where he constantly battles the force of the Argent Dawn, a lawful, good organization focused on protecting Azeroth from agencies that seek to destroy it, such as the Burning Legion and the Scourge. Kel'Thuzad stepped in for some redecorating and raised undead structures among the human ruins of Stratholme. Undead and necromancers control the city, while gargoyles and frostworms patrol the sky. Noxious orange mist oozes from the buildings and poisons living creatures, transforming them into servants of the Scourge. Kel'Thuzad's rule here is absolute, and from here he stretches his skeletal hands to control the surrounding Plaguelands. Some consider Stratholme to be one of the most dangerous places in Azeroth, outside of Northrend. Notably, the city also houses a few hundred Scarlet Crusade warriors from the Crimson Legion, who fight against the thousands of undead. The Crimson Legion being an elite group within the Scarlet Crusade, led by Grand Crusader Dathrahan, whose members can be found in strongholds and areas around the eastern and western Plaguelands. So now that we know the story behind the place, who did we have waiting for us in this incredibly dangerous location? So, as we mentioned, there is obviously two sides to Stratholme, as we say, Strat Live and Strat Dead. Now, let's start with Strat Live, and just bear in mind, everyone, this is going to take a while to get through because there's a boatload of bosses. Okay. Commander Maelor, previously the Scarlet Crusader Maelor the Zealous, is a level 47 undead member of the Risen, found in Stratholme. When Balnazar revealed himself, he, like the rest of the Scarlets in Stratholme, was killed and brought back as one of Balnazar's Risen. Maelor and a handful of other courageous warriors risked everything to protect the Scarlet Bastion from being desecrated by the undead. Tragically, they failed. Balnazar corrupted the fearless commander into one of his servants, transforming the zealot into a mockery of his former self. Then we had Instructor Galford, a level 47 elite mini-boss, who used to be known as Archivist Galford, a mortal human adept at fire magic until Balnazar slew the members of the Scarlet Crusade's Crimson Legion within Stratholme and raised them as the Risen. Galford was ultimately transformed amongst that bunch of crusaders. Galford once took great pride in caring for the Crusade's most valued documents. However, as he lay dying, he watched in horror as his precious tomes were burnt around him. Balnazar used this painful memory to imbue his servant with the fiery power that ravaged Galford in life. Next, Willie Hopebreaker. Previously known as a Scarlet Crusader, Cannon Master Willie, a level 47 elite undead of the Risen. Balnazar took great pleasure in leveraging the Cannon Master Willie's destructive capabilities in Undeath, calling his prized minion by the name of Hopebreaker. The Dreadlord relishes that he has twisted Willie and other Scarlet Crusaders, who so despise the undead in life, into his unwitting pawns. Next, Timmy the Cruel, a level 47 elite ghoul boss. Timmy's son was infamous for his savagery on the field of battle. Some speculate his sadism stemmed from the ceaseless bullying he endured as a child. Now reborn as a scourge monstrosity, his mind shattered, he is tormented by those memories, causing him to answer to the name he once loathed, Timmy. Next, Hearthsinger Forreston, a level 57 elite rare ghost travelling singer and piccolo player located in Stratholme, in between the live and undead sites. He is a wandering minstrel ghost who not only drops the Magister's boots, but also a piccolo of the flaming fire trinket, which causes folks to dance when you play its song. He is infamous for his oddly coloured and flamboyant sounding gear, such as the Rainbow Girdle. He was a travelling performer back when the city was alive and booming, and was caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The culling of Stratholme claimed the lives of innumerable people whose only crime was being in the doomed city. A travelling singer and piccolo player named Forreston was one such victim. He continues to wander the city in death, unable to accept his tragic fate. Next we have the Unforgiven, named Lilia in life, a level 47 elite wraith in Stratholme. Not much is known about the Unforgiven, but some have mentioned her mask is a truly powerful item. She was a former champion, presumably of the light, who committed heinous acts against innocents in Stratholme in the name of gaining unholy power. Lilia was a blade of righteousness among her people. After Arthas commanded his forces to purge the city, her sanity was ripped apart from seeing countless innocents die by her hand. She fell on her sword to escape the madness around her, and she now exists as a spectral being, forever denied absolution for her heinous acts. Skull, or Skull, however you want to say it, is a level 47 elite rare mob skeletal mage. He has an extremely infrequent spawn rate and can spawn in the area near the Stratholme Courier and near Frasiabi, or sometimes in the Festival Lane area. The Stratholme Courier is a level 45 elite undead found near Frasiabi's shop in Stratholme. The Courier is one of Postmaster Malone's lackeys and carries the keys needed to open the Stratholme post boxes. Opening 3 post boxes summons Malone. Balzaphon was a level 60 elite leech mini-boss found in Stratholme that spawned only during the Scourge invasion event of 2006. Balzaphon was a leech in purple robes that wandered in a circle around the fountain in the courtyard to the left of the service entrance in Stratholme. He had glowing blue eyes. Frasiabi is a level 47 undead elite. Frasiabi owned and operated Frasiabi's Premium Tobacco, a smoke shop in Stratholme, and refused to abandon it when the Scourge invaded. He fought to make sure the Scourge would never touch his famous tobacco, but he became one of them in the process of his defense. Packmaster Stonebruiser sent adventurers to collect his tobacco, but when they attempted to salvage it, he attacked. Postmaster Malone is a level 47 elite ghost mini-boss. Malone was the postmaster for Stratholme, and when the Scourge attacked, was unable to escape their masses. He now haunts the city, making sure that nobody tampers with the mail, and he has sworn that not even hail, sleet or snow shall stop him. Malone is the sole source of the Postmaster set. The Crimson Hammersmith is a level 46 undead human blacksmith. He was not worth mentioning, but since he was the Risen, the Dreadlord Balnazar taught him how to make all sorts of powerful demonic weaponry. Atiesh was a summoned demon boss encountered in Stratholme as part of the Atiesh Great Staff of the Guardian questline. Atiesh was summoned on consecrated earth in the Festival Lane between Elder Square and King Square, between the Scarlet and Baron runs, in other words. Balnazar, under the guise of Sidon Dathrahan, Grand Crusader of the Scarlet Crusade, is the final boss in the Scarlet Bastion of Stratholme, and is someone we've kind of already heard about. Now, on to Strat Dead. Magistrate Bartholus is a level 51 elite white mini-boss found on the Scourge side. After Tyrion was arrested for the purposes of his trial that we heard about earlier, Bartholus personally oversaw the Paladin's prosecution and served as a witness during Tyrion's trial. Bartholus also made plans for the torture and execution of Aetrig, only to see the Orc escape from Stratholme with Tyrion when Thrall attacked the city. During the raid, one of the Orcs jabbed a spear into Bartholus's chest. Despite the grievous wound, however, Bartholus survived and eagerly assumed his new position as Lord of Mardenhold after Tyrion went into exile. His title eventually passed to Tyrion's son, Talon Fordring. At some point after, having survived his impalement earlier on, Bartholus became Magistrate of Stratholme, where he remained until the time the city was purged by Prince Arthas Menethil. He evidently falls during this period, becoming the creature seen in Stratholme today. Baroness Anastari is a level 51 elite Banshee mini-boss. She is the main antagonist of the Eastern Plagueland storyline. Baroness Anastari was once a baroness in life, but she was brutally murdered by the Scourge and is now under the control of the Leech King. She now guards a ziggurat in Stratholme. Her most powerful ability is to dominate any individual she is touching, actually displacing the soul of her target. This domination temporarily places the Banshee's spirit within the individual thus affected. At this point, Anastari is no longer a Banshee, but instead becomes a corporeal form of undead. While she lived, Anastari took what she wanted, no matter the cost. Death has done little to change that. Her soul ripped from her body, Anastari became a Banshee, and she has abandoned her love of material trinkets in favour of possessions of a far more sinister kind. Nerub Enkarn is a level 51 elite Nerubian Crypt Fiend. She is a mini-boss found on the undead side who protects one of the 3 ziggurats that guard the entrance to the slaughterhouse, where Baron Rivendare can be found. Nerub Enkarn was a fearsome warrior during the War of the Spider. Ultimately, she succumbs to her wounds and was raised into undeath as an obedient minion of the Scourge. Now, the Nerubian guards a ziggurat in Stratholme as fiercely as she defended her home in life. Maleki the Pallid is a level 51 elite. Maleki is a mortal human adept at frost and shadow magic. Maleki was among the first to join the cult of the damned, showing tremendous aptitude in harnessing the chill of the grave. Driven by an insatiable desire for power, the mage fervently hones his skills in dark magic to prepare for when he will be remade as a lich. Ramstein the Gorger is a level 51 elite abomination. Like all abominations, he's not particularly intelligent, and relying on his sense of tactics is an exceptionally poor idea. He's fearless, tenacious, and resilient, capable of pressing his advantage in combat for hours without growing weary or weak. He's responsible for the death of thousands, including Ranger Lord Nathanos Maris. Maris, now undead and working for the Forsaken under the name Nathanos Blightcaller, wants Ramstein killed. Ramstein is one of the Scourge's most infamous abominations, a horror stitched together from numerous corpses and empowered by a ceaseless hunger. This monster committed unspeakable atrocities on countless innocent souls when Scourge forces overran Stratholme. Stonespine is a level 51 elite rare mob, a gargoyle that occasionally spawns as a replacement to the Rockwing gargoyles or Rockwing screechers in Stratholme. The Blackguard Swordsmith is a level 50 elite armoured skeleton. He does not appear normally in the instance, but will appear when a player tries to pick up a parchment called blacksmithing plans. The swordsmith will appear and will try to kill the players. He's a member of the Black Guard, an organisation of elite skeletal units serving Baron Rivendare. Next we have a group of characters: Almar the Vanquisher, Gregor the Justicar, Vicar Hieronymus, Nemus the Arbiter, and Cathela the Seeker, who were 5 ghostly paladins that spawned outside the Alonzas Chapel in Stratholme during the final part of the True Masters of the Light, the Charger quest for Blood Knights. And finally we had Baron Rivendare, a powerful Death Knight in the service of the Lich King, ruling over the city of Stratholme for the Scourge. In life, Baron Rivendare was a rich landowner in Stratholme and a friend to Kel'Thuzad, who convinced him to join the Cult of the Damned. He eventually became a Death Knight and was placed in control of the burning remains of Stratholme. When he became a champion of the Scourge, he condemned his favourite horse to join him in undeath. After Arthas left for Northrend, Rivendare sent a shipment of grain to a village of Lordaeron where Thomas Thompson happens to be stationed at. When the villagers turned into mindless zombies, Thomas understood that Rivendare was a traitor. Baron Rivendare later coordinated the efforts of the Lich King in the Plague Lands and battled with agents of the Argent Dawn sent to Stratholme to kill him. Whew! We made it! And that's all the bosses out of the way and all the lore out of the way for Stratholme. And so guess what it's time for now? Now it's time for That's What We Said. Each Friday on Countdown to Classic, after we've covered the lore, we look back to what the community thought about the content that we've just discussed at the time. Now, I must apologise, everyone. I'm not going to be able to go too in-depth on my commentary on the forum posts that I bring up this week, just because it is 1 o'clock in the morning right now, and I really want to get to bed eventually, so I won't go too nuts on the commentary, but I'm still going to read you all these forum posts, still bring you a few takes on Stratholme, and we'll carry on from there. But I do apologise, and I promise I'll get more in-depth next week. Now, we begin with 3 quick posts in a row, and all of these posts were in relation to a thread on the official forums asking about, hey, what was your favorite instance in Classic? And these 3 users all kind of agreed. So we'll start with user Clicks, who says this: Stratholme or UBRS, both for the sense of dread and lore. Then we had user Isilaria, who said this: Stratholme has to be my favourite 5-man instance. Lots of good drops, some cool trinkets, neat atmosphere. Also, I'm a paladin, so I get to use exorcism left and right. And if I feel like role-playing, I can vanquish some undead and have some fun. Next we have user Andruxos, who says this: Stratholme. Having played all Warcraft expansions and in particular Warcraft 3, Stratholme was lore-wise the most interesting one. And also, it was kick-ass. Well, in the sense that even when geared, you could get your ass kicked if you made a wrong move. Now, the reason I brought up those 3 posts all in a row is that obviously they're all gushing a little bit over Stratholme. And I think that the one reason that they all kind of tie together is the atmosphere or feel of the instance. Now, I know that Stratholme is generally a relatively well-beloved instance. A lot of us did like it back in the day, some for different reasons. But the tone and feel of the instance is what drew a lot of people to it, along with the lore that I've just read out to you in great detail. A lot of of people very, very fondly remember the culling of Stratholme from Warcraft 3. A lot of us played Warcraft 3. A lot of us loved Warcraft 3. I know I did, I'll tell you that much. I actually bought it again over the weekend and I'm replaying it at the moment. I'm loving it. And actually I've heard a few of you doing this since they released the new patch. So that's a bit of fun that we're all having a bit of playtime with Warcraft 3 again. But the culling of Stratholme was obviously a very famous mission within that game. And it's one that people, particularly the exchange between Lothar and Arthas, has become known to be quite famous. A lot of people can quote those lines, you know, this city must be purged, things like that. It's amazing. So a lot of people have some very fond memories of Stratholme because we've kind of been there before, even though, yes, we also kind of saw it in Warcraft 2 as well. We know this location. We're familiar with it. It's not a new site that we got to dive into for the first time in World of Warcraft. We had kind of done it before. So people enjoy the lore and the history side of it. But on top of that, there is a tone to Stratholme. It's dark. It's a kind of grim, gritty area considering what is going on there. And personally, I'm a big fan of that. And I've read online that a lot of you are as well. Areas like Duskwood and Stratholme really appeal to me. I like that dark sense of foreboding. And I've chatted with someone on Reddit recently about this very point. It's the dark, grim, kind of undead and ghostly feel to some areas that really appeal to me and just sing out and make me want to go there. I love that. I love the undead side of things. It's fantastic. And there was a lot of death, decay, fire and ruin in Stratholme. It wasn't the most pleasant place to be, but I loved that. Did a lot of you feel the same way? I feel like some of you did. If you did and you've got a story to tell me about why you love Stratholme, please email the show at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Anyway, we move on to the next post from Reddit user Spayrox12, who says this, and the title was, PSA, Stratholme hurts like crazy. And that user goes on to say, okay, listen, I know you want to complete a dungeon the fastest way possible with minimum effort. I get that. But Stratholme is different. Strat isn't perfectly balanced, and tanks dying is a common occurrence. I have leveled 5 characters in the last 2 weeks, which were either healers or a tank, and I saw it all the time. The shaman that knocks enemies back, the hunter using multi-shot, the rogue thinking he can solo a pack and then dying calling out for lol heals, even myself sometimes charging into a pack without a care in the world. Stratholme hurts. Let the tanks do their job, however slow it might be. I love all of you, but I don't want to run to the entrance ever again because some person thought it was going too slow. P.S. Don't spawn the post guys when you're fighting 2 or 3 groups of enemies already. Fair point. And what that user obviously brings up is some people perhaps didn't like Stratholme, or perhaps maybe not liked, but found it difficult or at least hard to manage groups there, considering the spacing of the instance and the general design or floor plan. People kind of running off and triggering mobs and doing their own thing, going a bit rogue at times, usually rogues going rogue, but who knows. But it was a hard place at times to really keep people on point. And obviously strategy and tactics still very much had to be adhered to. Tagging mobs, slowing people down, saying, no, let's talk about what we're going to do here. Some people got a little overly familiar with Stratholme, and when they forgot themselves would kind of blare through everything, run around going, let's pull the next mob. It'll be great. It'll be cool. Oh shit, there's 20 of them. And then you wipe because you got overconfident. And it's not the place for that. Now, some of you might be shaking your heads saying, Josh, what the fuck are you talking about? Stratholme was one of the easiest instances of all time. However, I would still put forward that it could, I agree with this post to a certain degree, it could kick your ass at times if you took your eye off the prize, if you weren't quite paying attention, as with a lot of instances in vanilla, because vanilla was a harder game, if you weren't quite 100% paying attention, you could very easily be the cause of a wipe for your group and then be subject to some yelling and some repair bills, which just flat out piss people off. And that may have led some people to kind of avoid Strat. Some people didn't like it and didn't go there a lot for this very reason. No, people kind of fuck up there a bit too much. It's not really for me. Was that you, when you played vanilla? Write to the show and let me know. But we move on to the next post from Militiades Booger, who says this: "This place is grim, grim, grim. If you turn up your brightness and look closely, you'll see the remains of burnt people. They're smouldering, seriously. These folks were not killed by Arthas. They're wearing oh god no expressions that don't match up with the swift death that Light's justice to the head would met out. When someone hits you with a hammer that big, you go splat quick on your face. No, these statue-like people can really only be the ones who ran afoul of a peckish Mal'Ganis before Arthas could get to them. Remember how Tichondrius eating souls ignites people? Well..." And the point of that post is this: did you take the time to look around Stratholme, or were you too busy just kind of speed running it, as the previous post alluded to? A lot of people did just kind of want to burn through Strat. Come on, quick, Strat dead, now Strat live, let's go, pull mobs, oh shit, postmasters, alright, let's fucking deal with it, go. Just get the loot, get in, get out, take as many bosses down as you can, and pray for those Death Charger rains and see how you go. But others, because of the size of Stratholme, and I would say that, Stratholme was a reasonably sized instance, obviously with the 2 wings in particular, did you take the time to stop and smell the roses? Because, as this user points out, if you did, and as people say, they really loved the lore of the place, there were enough tidbits and little just drops of design goodness left for us by Blizz that showed off the very grim, dark feel and tone of the place. Blizzard was quite aware that there was a lot of backstory to this location, and they took the time to put some things in for us who would stop to notice. Did you stop and notice? Do you generally stop and smell the roses when you run instances? Do you take the time to look around? Or have you played the game so much at this point that you just don't really care? How do you digest World of Warcraft now? Write to me, let me know. On to the next post. And these is a few in a row, all kind of on the same point again. Firstly, from Evil Fate: "Stratholme was my favourite, mostly because of the Baron's Death Charger." Then next, from user Galthuk: "Stratholme was pretty cool, and you could hope for the cool horse mount drop." Next, from Broken Wind: "Running Strat deadside hundreds of times to try to RNG the mount from the Baron." Now, obviously, there's a point. I've read out those 3 posts in a row, and that point was, come on, be honest. Were you just running Stratholme for the mount? That sweet, sweet mount that absolutely everybody wanted. The Baron's Death Charger. When you saw that, or if you tell me, did you ever see those sweet Death Charger's reigns drop? A lot of people ran this instance a lot of times, and when I hear people say hundreds of times, I don't know, how do you guys feel about this? Call me skeptical and a dickhead, which you absolutely can, but when I hear people sort of saying things like, I ran this instance hundreds of times to get that particular item, how hyperbolic are we being? Do you really think they actually ran it, let's say, 300 times plus? Please write to the show and let me know. If you're like, yes, Josh, you idiot. There were players who played this game so many times, they had the time to run Stratholme over 200 times or over 150 times, whatever it might be. Now, I didn't do that because A, I didn't get to play a lot back in the day. Like I've told you guys before, I generally was only putting in about somewhere in the realm of 15 hours a week back in the days of vanilla, as much as I could, but, I could, only get so much in with law school and everything. But if you had all the time in the world to play World of Warcraft back in the day, tell me, were you running particular instances an insane amount of times? I would believe it. You guys just write into me and tell me. I balk a little bit when I hear the term hundreds. But back on point. This particular item is a well-known and coveted one. Do you know anyone who got it? Did you ever see it drop and just miss out and you've been kicking yourself ever since? Or were you lucky enough to win it? It was incredibly rare to see this drop. I know I never had anything to do with it. Now, I did see people run around with the mount and be like, holy shit, that looks pretty cool. But personally, I didn't have a great desire to go through Stratholme that much just for this particular item. Like I've told you guys before, I'm not too much of a cosmetic guy. So if I've got a mount that gets me from A to B, I don't really care what it looks like. Yeah, it's kind of cool, but I wouldn't bust a hump trying to get it. And I know I'm in the minority there. So I understand. I'm not throwing you under the bus if you absolutely want cool cosmetic stuff. I appreciate that there is a side of the game that does make that pretty cool. It's just never really floated my boat personally. But anyway, we move on to the next point, which is from user Cash or Check, who says this. I'd really like to see Strat 10 in Classic. With the increased responsibilities of life, I've resigned myself to the fact that I probably won't have the time to do all the farming and prep for most of the raids. However, stuff that's tuned to 10 players might very well be doable. One could argue that you have the same prep for 10 mans, I suppose. We'll certainly spend far less time getting smaller raids together, and most guilds will be able to easily field a raid team of that size. Perhaps we can trend towards having more 10-player content in some eventual patches for guilds that aim specifically for that smaller raid size. I do hope there will eventually be new content in the spirit of Classic WoW, or perhaps scaling of all the raidable dungeons to level 60. Heh, RFC raids scale to 60. I would so want a piece of that. Personally, the most fun I ever had raiding was doing 10-player stuff. I hope to see Strat 10 in Classic. Now, regardless of how you felt about a few of things that were said there, let's focus on the 10-man strat point. Now, patch 1.10 reduced the cap at Stratholme to 5 men. And previous to that, it was obviously possible to run Stratholme with 10 men. It wasn't always necessarily done, but that's the way it could have been done. So, 10 men or 5 men? Which did you prefer? Now, I have a funny feeling that a lot of you are going to say, Josh, what are you talking about? It's 5 men. 5 men all the way. You only need 5. Keep it to 5. Why add those extra 5 people just to muddy the waters with the haul for loot? Particularly if the sweet mount drops. What am I going to do with 10 people trying to get it? And I appreciate that. But it's an interesting point to me because we've talked a lot about the difficulty curve that's going to come with Classic. And with all of us being so intimate with the content now and having so much information available online with how to do everything, people feel that the game will be easier, even though it wasn't an easy game back in the day. It might be now. So if we brought 10-man strat to what will be potentially an easier version of Strat, because we all know what's going on, wouldn't that result in ridiculous face rolling? Would that result in every man and his dog having the Baron's mount? Because we're all running it so often, because we're all so good at it, it's not even an issue anymore. And this next post I'm going to read you kind of extrapolates on that point, that perhaps it will be easier and perhaps more people will have the mount. This is posted by user Valhalion, who says this. Regarding the Baron's mount, people saying epics and rare items were earned don't remember how easy vanilla really was. Bosses had 1 to 2 mechanics. The hardest things to do in vanilla was pulling. Yes, they were rarer, but not because of anything hard. It won't take a month for Molten Core to be farmed. I'd give it 2 months before it gets pugged. I don't remember full pugs in vanilla, but God, it's going to happen in Classic. Classic servers are going to be exactly like when Nax was re-released. We have so much knowledge about it now that almost everything will be trivialized. Casters know the importance of downranking spells, DPS knows threat management, tanks know how to generate threat better, and as a community, the WoW population has grown. I'm not saying classic servers are going to be bad or fail, but people give too much credit to dumb things. Now, kind of what the point of that post is, as I said, will every man and his dog get those death charges reigns because the game is easier because we're all so much better at it, apparently? And will that trivialize epic and rare items because they won't be so epic and rare when we're taking down the bosses more often and more people wind up with this stuff? Well, something to chew on, but I feel like the next post really does address that because there's things like drop rates that you have to take into account. So, this post from Wowhead, and I didn't catch the user's name, but it's a very good one, says the following. The drop rate on the death charges range is somewhere between 0.02 and 0.04%. For one run of a given instance, the odds are higher that you are audited by the IRS, you will catch a baseball at a Major League Baseball game, you'll die from slipping in a bathtub, or you'll have a life. If you're in a group, divide the chance by 5. And the point there is that you probably won't have absolutely everyone running around with the Baron's mount because you've still got these ridiculous drop rates to contend with. Yes, we might be face rolling the content. Yes, we might be taking everything down a lot more often than usual. But it's still a ridiculously low drop rate, to the point that, as people say, they still have to run it hundreds of times in order to try and get it. And that's just to try and see it, let alone winning a roll on it. So I don't think we have too much to worry about in terms of every second person having that sexy, sexy mount. But anyway, with all that done, now it's time for anger management. Each episode on Countdown to Classic, I read out some of the angriest posts that I found in relation to the content that we've just discussed. Now, considering it's 1:30 in the morning and my neighbours would fucking kill me, I'm not going to scream too loud for anger management this week. So I'll just say it forcefully, perhaps. So here we go with user Narya, who says this. I don't care about the Baron mount, and I hated Stratholme. Now watch it drop, and I'll get it on a greed roll the first time I go to Dead Stratholme. Next we have this from user Wasabi Sanjuro, who says this. Oh, it's a gear. Clicky clicky. Ha ha ha. It opened. Why is everything hitting us with death? Next we have a submission from a deleted user from Reddit, who says this. I'm gonna pull all the trash from the other side too. Scrub tank, stop dying to the 25 mobs on you. Next we go back again to Wasabi Sanjuro, who says this. I've had this happen so many times, where the tank would just bolt off and fuck everybody else. I remember getting kicked once because I was still rezzing an overconfident rogue who kept dying, but everybody was off getting killed by other groups of everything. I'm so sick of that bullshit. That, or wannabe tanks who sign up as DPS, but then still try to tank the fuck out of everything. Fuck those guys too. Next we have this submission from user Barbar Black Sheep, who says, okay, so exactly on my 20th run I decided I would get something more out of this than just the mount. I forced myself to do 20 push-ups after each run. Also, unless I completed those 20 push-ups, I couldn't run it again. For a while, I was only able to run it once a day because I could barely squeeze out those 20. Now, however, I can run it the complete 5 times an hour for 2 hours. A little more if you're considering the time it takes to do 200 push-ups in between. So now it's run 203. 1 epic sword, a handful of BOE World Epics, thousands of gold added to my bank account, not to mention the fact that the Argent Dawn know me by my damn name, and I've completed a total of 3,660 push-ups. I've made a lot of progress, and yet no progress at all. At this rate, I'll be able to slap a gorilla unconscious, and I still won't have the mount. And with all that done, now it's time for Tidbits. Each Friday, Countdown to Classic brings you a few, perhaps little-known pieces of information about the content that we've just covered, or you may well have known it. So, I'm actually going to reach back to a couple of tidbits on the Warcraft 3 Stratholme campaign that you might not have known. Did you know that originally, children were meant to come out of buildings and be killable objectives for the mission, the culling of Stratholme, in addition to men and women? Several sound files of villagers panicking and begging for mercy are installed, but unused. These were both deemed too disturbing, and their triggers were turned off. By hacking into the game, though, the triggers can still simply be turned on. Also, villagers do not attack before turning into undead to give the player the moral choice of waiting for them to turn first or killing them before they become a threat. This also forces the player to directly kill villagers if they choose to, and obviously was purposefully done by Blizzard to see what we would kind of do. Now, on to the World of Warcraft side of things. Did you know that Timmy the Cruel yells Timmy because it's a reference to the South Park character Timmy? Perhaps you say, yes, Josh, of course I knew that. Move on. And I will. Also, it's interesting to note that there is a raid instance portal at the end of the instance outside the Slaughter Square. This was intended to lead to Naxxramas, similar to the Molten Core entrance from Blackrock Depths. There are ruined flags carrying the insignia of Lordaeron in original blue inside the tunnel, which are not seen anywhere else inside Stratholme. The portal can be seen during the event before Rivendare, when lesser undead are brought in from the area. If you delay, the area will close and you'll become stuck. Also, the ghostly citizens and spectral citizens in this instance will emote back things like /wave and /dance. Next, there's a signpost at the entrance of Stratholme that says, "To Stranglethorn." Now, whilst being a very long way from Stranglethorn Vale, this sign is still technically correct, as it's actually pointing in the right direction. Next, I just want to take you to a couple of points from the Countdown to Classic Discord channel that came up today when we were discussing Stratholme. And user Minoru said this about the aforementioned Piccolo of the Flaming Fire, the trinket that dropped in Stratholme and when used would cause all players around to dance. And Minoru says this: I've definitely heard of guilds that threatened to kick people using that trinket in raids because it was distracting players while the raid leader was describing mechanics and strategies before a boss fight. Needless to say, those very same guilds probably had an aneurysm when the toy train set released in Wrath of the Lich King that made everyone around the user go /train. And another Discord user, Palfurus, replied with this: I remember that blasted trinket. People used to set it off in the auction house all the time. It didn't disrupt anything, but it irked me all the same. Now, I have to admit, I had completely forgotten about the Piccolo of the Flaming Fire, and doing this episode was a really nice little trip down memory lane with items like that, and it did make me laugh at some things that I thought of from back in the day. But anyway, guys, that's been everything. Normally I would give you a really big animated shout-out section here, but like I said, it's 1:30 in the morning, and I'm really tired and I want to go to bed, and I still need to edit this and get it out to you. So I'm just going to cut off now, but I'll just say one thing before I go. Please, the usual, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Please leave a review on iTunes if you haven't already. I can't tell you how much that helps the show. So if you're liking it, please just tap a few stars, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, whatever you like. Just leave a review. It really helps. And also, just a reminder that today for you guys, Friday night and Saturday night from about 6:30 p.m. onwards, although maybe it'll be a little bit later if I sleep in because I'm going to bed late, I will be taking phone calls, guys. So please, I'm starting up this talkback radio style segment on the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. A few of you have already told me that you are super keen to call in, and it's going to be a very short, sharp burst between 1 to 5 minutes. Get something off your chest about WoW. Say, hey Josh, I just want to call in and tell you how much I hate this mechanic. Or, hey Josh, I just want to tell you how much I love Zolgarub, and here's why. Anything you want to say. Keep it short, keep it sharp, keep it insightful, and say it to the world. And I'll compile them all, and I want to do about a 20 to 30 minute segment every week on Wednesdays after the interviews that let people hear this really fun talkback WoW radio segment, which I think will really work. But it's only going to work if you all call into me. So give it a try. Don't be shy. Send me an email at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com or join the Discord. The link is in the show notes and it's on the website, and PM me and say, hey Josh, I'm really interested in this call thing. What do I do? And I'll let you know. So anyway, everyone, that's it for the episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you on Monday. I'm going to bed.